This is Your Own Best Company, a podcast and community for creative people who value and enjoy working alone. Welcome, everyone, to Your Own Best Company. This is a podcast for people who love working alone. I'm really delighted today to introduce you to Cheryl Benedict. Cheryl is a transition consultant and an author based here in Colorado. And we were just talking about the risk of bears in your driveway. She had to have some tires replaced because some bears ate her tires. Now, if you're planning on moving to Colorado, I want you to keep that in mind. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you very much.
Now, the company that you have formed is called MORF Consulting. It's a transition consultancy. Can you talk a little bit about what a transition consultancy is?
So I would language myself as a leadership consultant, executive coach who has had probably 30 years experience in change and transition. So I don't necessarily go into an organization focusing on change and transition. It just seems that everyone is up against some kind of major change. And then the internal process that ensues, I refer to as transition.
And you work with all kinds of organizations and individuals, I should say, who are at various stages of transition. I had an opportunity to read a little bit of your book. I haven't been able to finish it yet, but one of the things that I really was struck by in that was that you brought up the very apparent fact that life is just basically a transition. And I think there's a lot to be said about, the different ways that people adjust as transitions are unfolding. In fact, I think that's probably what I'm getting the gist is that your book is primarily about those adjustments that are made emotionally and otherwise. Can you talk a little bit about if people are going through a transition, what are some of the things that they can expect to go through?
So when there's been a major change that's thrust upon you that you didn't ask for, it typically triggers this internal response called transition, which we mentioned. But transition always begins with an ending and then ends with a new beginning. But my experience is you can't just sort of blithely go from the ending to the new beginning. There's terrain you have to travel.
Right.
And so the ending often is the sense of, wow, life is never going to be the same again. I'm never going to be the same again. I don't have a clue what it's going to be, but I just know I'm on the merry-go-round or I'm on the roller coaster now. And so in my experience, the ending often goes to a place of shock and then denial, and then often a sense of anger. Like, I didn't ask for this. This isn't fair. Blame, wanting to cast aspersions at anyone else so you don't have to have the ending fully land. And then a sense of worry and sadness. But my experience is most people will drop into what I refer to as the in-between zone. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of outside of time and space. And it's very much a sense of immersion and a sense of, okay, wow, I need to gather myself in. Who am I now? What matters to me now? Mm-hmm. What do I want to keep? What do I want to let go? But when we're able to accept the change, then I think the magic begins, and we move back up the graph through acceptance and exploration, new insights, discovery, until we're fully back in the new beginning and with a renewed sense of purpose, and the fog is lifted and it's a sense of, wow, that was something.
I was going to mention that on your website for the book, I believe, you do have some diagrams that people can refer to that kind of show the going down into
Yeah.
the bottom, and then being in the bottom for a little while, and then coming back up again. It's interesting to me that there are so many parallels between the stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross
Exactly.
talked about in her work. And I think one of the things that's interesting to me is that a lot of people are surprised that even in positively perceived transitions, that there's the same kind of a pattern that happens. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I'd love to. So when I moved, we talked about this briefly, but when I moved from Dolores, Colorado to Evergreen, Colorado, I I was on the phone with a client, and I just noticed I wasn't on top of my game, and I was delighted about the move. I was the one that found the house. I was all in.
Yeah.
But I noticed when I was on the phone that I couldn't go as deeply. Often I can really feel someone through the phone, and I couldn't. And I remembered having this moment of panic, like, oh no, what's happened? And I realized, Cheryl, you're in transition. Nothing is familiar. Yes, you love this home, but you haven't really settled in yet. You haven't really put down roots. You're still kind of adrift. And so I reassured myself that I would fully return back to my normal, intuitive, empathic self, and not to worry. Because what I think we do is we make it worse by wondering what's wrong with me, when it feels as if we're only operating with about 60% of us, because 40% of us is pretty subsumed still with
Yeah.
the change. And that can be deeply disorienting, wondering, wow, do I have early onset of Alzheimer's? Like, seriously, what is wrong with me? Memory loss, forgetfulness, harder to concentrate, harder to focus. And that's why I wrote the book. I never again wanted anyone to be going through transition thinking, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
I wanted people to understand that all of this physical, emotional, psychological upheaval is par for the course. And something about being able to own it, accept it, engage in creative endeavors that remind you who you are, bring you back to your center, your source, really help. So,
Are there times when people are in the midst of this and they get stuck in that downward trend, and they don't get to that place of acceptance and that outer space kind of thing that you were describing? In those situations, what are the things that lead to them being stuck?
I would say excessive watching of media. I watched that during COVID.
Yeah.
I probably coach close to 85 people a month, and I would watch someone reading something or hearing something. They'd move to acceptance, they were moving up, and then boom, they were mad or wanting to blame, the labs in Wuhan, or they were getting caught in the trigger. And what happens with a trigger is that it moves us from our normal cognitive, rational brain back to the reptilian or the limbic brain. And what happens is then we perceive everything as a threat, and we're in kind of a fight, flight, freeze kind of mode. And so when you're doing that, it's pretty hard
Yeah.
to have your wits about you. So I would say it's not a linear process, but rather you get to acceptance and you do your best to stay there, but then boom, something happens and you're back. So just like anything else, I think it takes emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
self-awareness, being aware how much news can I actually take in to where I feel informed versus feeling overwhelmed and triggered? What are the news sources that I feel are actually trusted and not just inflammatory and clickbait? So
Yeah.
I would say that for me, I've had to largely take a vacation from news because it just doesn't seem to serve me well. I can get back over on the left-hand side of the diagram, and then I'm no good, because
Yeah.
as an executive coach, I'm only as good as what I can bring. So I
Yeah.
have to see myself a bit like a vessel, like it's kind of a sacred thing, sacred covenant I've made with myself to be present and fully there for whoever I'm with.
That's a wonderful way of saying it. I have felt that in my own work as well. This podcast is directed to people who generally want to work alone. They prefer working alone. They love that lifestyle of solitude, creativity, and the ability to just have a lot of autonomy. However, there are a lot of folks that I've worked with as a coach who have had a lifelong dream of being a freelance writer or being a designer or being, some kind of a creative specialist. And when they get there, many of them will come to me a year into that transition and they're just shattered because it is so unlike what they imagined it would be. And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit in terms of how we walk the plank between imagination and reality when we're going through a transition like this, especially in light of a person who's carrying a dream into a more manifested place. Tell me a little bit about what would be behind that adjustment.
I'm I'm only going to be able to speak from really my own experience, but I felt an actual call to write the book, almost like a spiritual call, and a sense of urgency about doing it, heightened sense of urgency. So I'd never written a book before. I didn't have a clue. So I just devoted, I switched my work around so that I was working 12-hour days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I devoted to writing. And it took 5 months to write the book. Honestly, it resulted in a emergency surgery, perforated ulcer, almost dying on the table and having a near-death experience. So but there was this crazy sense of urgency that I had to get it published. And so it was published January 2nd, 2020, went into the hospital for emergency surgery. 2 weeks later, almost died, near-death experience. I'm back home, healing, COVID hits, and my book gets legs because everyone wants to know about how do they navigate COVID? How do they navigate the emotional and psychological aspects of this unprecedented global pandemic that none of us had ever experienced? And so I guess back to your question, it's if you're feeling a call, there is a window. Mm-hmm. There is a window and a threshold. And I think it's very much a sense of intimacy with self to step across that threshold and say, yes, I'm the one. Yeah. And to enter into that interesting cocoon of creativity where it's just you and the computer, and accessing a higher sense of self with the writing. It was profound. It was truly profound, but also lonely.
Right.
Also lonely.
Are you familiar with Natalie Goldberg at all?
Oh, Writing Down the Bones, right? Yeah. I attended a workshop of hers in Santa Fe.
I think it was Writing Down the Bones, or it might have been Wild Mind. And one of them or the other, she was talking about finishing a book and realizing that she was touch-starved and she just needed to be with another human being. And it was like, it was urgent. And I remember that. You just reminded me of that memory.
I appreciate that. I mean, I basically, I maybe saw Paul, my husband, half a day on Sunday.
Yeah.
It was really strange because as a INFP, I'm an introvert, so I really recharge in solitude. I really do. That's how it works for me. But I was just realizing I kind of missed out on 5 months of our relationship
Hmm.
because he became a solo agent. I'm really grateful he was able to do that because I was subsumed
Yeah.
and immersed.
Well, I'm not surprised to find that you and I are the same type.
You are
I'm
really?
INFP too. Yeah.
I'm not surprised either.
Which it occurred to me as you were speaking that we haven't even told people what the name of the book is yet, where they can find out about it. Feels like that should have probably been done in the introduction, but we ran with it, and here we are. In any case, the book is called The Wisdom of Transition, and talk to people a little bit about. You've given us some of the ideas of the inspiration for it, but talk to us a little bit about what do you feel was the urgency around that? Why did it come in so urgently?
I felt it in my peripheral for a while.
Yeah.
It's like there are parts of me that were aware that I was going to be doing something around change and transition. I truly didn't know what. It
Mm-hmm.
was when I gave a I was the presenter at an all-employee meeting for an organization up in Berthoud because they just had a leadership change. The general manager had retired. They had a new one and 4 new division directors. And I think that man had been the general manager for 40 years.
Yeah.
So the organization it was turbulent, and they were trying to warm to the new leadership, but I think they were really missing
Yeah.
the guy who was very patriarchal, almost like the dad of the organization. So the senior leadership team, I'd done a couple of retreats with them and had coached them. And they said, would you come and speak to all of our folks on what might be happening?
Yeah.
Like why it might be so hard to let go of Eric and embrace Brad
Yeah.
and his team. So yeah, I sat in the back of the room while they kicked off the meeting, and I was I really liked it because I was getting to hang out with the people who didn't want to be there. The
Yeah.
people who were in the very, 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 very back of the room, and it was mostly guys who worked in the field, laying pipe and doing water delivery, and managed to kind of connect human to human. And then when I was called up, I went forward, and I could tell they were surprised, that I'd been an ordinary Joe.
Yeah.
But I just stood up and I said, here's what you may be experiencing physically. Here are the physical symptoms that might be present. Here are the emotional symptoms. Here are the psychological symptoms and the mental symptoms. And if you are, please know that you're in good company. Everyone who goes through this kind of change probably experiences that. I mean, some of you may find it very hard to focus and concentrate, may find it very emotional, like angry for no reason or unexpected tears for no reason, seemingly.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you're going through this big change, and here's transition. And I really tried to explain the curve. And the guys in the back of the room were sitting forward in their chairs, and the women towards the front. A
Yeah.
couple had tears going down their face. And I had goosebumps because I felt like I am the right person with the right expertise with this group, and truly here to help transform and heal. And at the end, I got a standing ovation, which was incredible. And I
Yeah.
stayed after they were having a barbecue out in the lot. So I stayed around for about 3 hours, and all these people came up to me in the hallway and said, thank you. You
Yeah.
have no idea. Thank you for naming it, because I have felt so guilty for missing Eric and resisting this. And now I understand that's okay. And I'm not a bad person, and I will be back.
Yeah.
I will be back. So that was the motivation for me.
Okay.
Because in that moment with the standing ovation, it was this sense of boom, something landed.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Woo. I can even feel it now coursing up and down my neck and head, that sense of recognition that I'm supposed to get the word out. And I think the best way to do that is a book. So,
Good.
yeah, that's how it transpired. It was just a
Wow.
sense of boom, knowing
Yeah.
and responding to the call. And the sense of urgency, I mean, I don't know, kind of above my pay grade, but I think it has a lot to do with COVID. Well, first of all, I think it had a lot to do with an unexpected perforated ulcer, emergency surgery, pretty much almost dying and having a near-death experience,
Yeah.
recovering, because if I wouldn't have done it, then the book wouldn't have been done and I would have been healing and COVID would have happened. I mean, I think there was this sequential thing that transpired, and it was important for me to play my part and
Yeah.
get my book out there because, I mean, I couldn't believe it at the end of 2020. I heard from SABA, Sound Advice Book Awards, out of the UK that 14 brand new authors had been were finalists in their best new author category, and from 11 countries. And on December 5th, they had this adorable Zoom celebration. They tried to make it really special. And anyway, my book won.
Hey, cool.
So I think it has everything to do with timing, you
Yeah.
know, and the topic, and well, and just grace, really.
Yeah. Well, in reading it, it feels like to me that it could have the same kind of a lifespan that a book like The Road Less Traveled had way back when. And the
Wow.
thing that was really interesting about that was the thing that gave that book legs was that it was given as a gift millions of times. And it feels like to me that this book, once somebody reads it, they're going to know that everybody in their life probably needs to read it too. And it's going to be something that's going to be shared and given. And I really feel like that it has that nature about it, just in my own cursory reading of it at this point. But I really feel like that you've got a huge opportunity here, and it's exciting to hear about the favorable, feedback from Sava. And I wanted to mention thewisdomoftransition.com is the website where you can learn more about the book and about the different stages of adjustment in transition. Very valuable information, and it's also a place where you can find the information to get in touch with Cheryl directly. In our correspondence, Cheryl, we talked a little bit about your own work transitions. You started out as a career coach, or you were a career coach at one point in your arc. And then you moved from that more into the executive coaching and the transitional types of consulting and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that change for you and what inspired it really, and then how did it transpire?
I'd love to. So, have you ever heard of outplacement?
Mm-hmm.
That's a phrase familiar to you. Okay, so I was working for Lee Hecht Harrison in Kansas City, which is an outplacement firm, and I'd gotten promoted to the vice president of client services, but my main job was to conduct a 2-day career transition workshop for everybody who'd been let go,
Yeah.
largely to put together a resume and start thinking about accomplishments and to prepare for interview questions and how to negotiate your first year's compensation. But what I started to notice was I would start talking about all this stuff, but people's eyes were glazed.
Oh,
I recognized they were just in pain. It's a shock
yeah.
to be fired through seemingly no fault of your own. Most of these organizations that had let them go was paying for them to find another job because it wasn't a performance issue. They were wanting to flatten.
Yeah.
Good old Michael Hammer wanting to flatten the organization. So I would have like 16 people in a workshop, and they'd be wanting to pay attention to me out of kindness and deference and respect. But I could tell they were unable to take in any of that unless I addressed where they were.
Yeah.
And I said, boy, are you in the ending now? And I just talked about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work on death and dying, loss. You're experiencing a tremendous loss. Where are you in that process?
Yeah.
Are you in shock? Are you in denial? Are you in anger and rage? Are you in blame? I think Elizabeth has bargaining as a part of her stuff. Are you worried? Are you sad? Where are you? And something about letting them talk about that
Yeah.
and be with that um, allowed them to go, wow, I'm seen for where I am.
Yeah.
And then I was able to talk about, okay, I so get it. I've been fired before. I get it. It's like a sucker punch to the gut. But let's if it's okay, can we start to move in to this other stuff? And I felt like they were so grateful that
Yeah.
I'd acknowledged that. And I thought, wow. And then I would work with all these people individually. I'd probably have 7 to 8 people a day
Yeah.
in my office working on whatever stage of the career transition they were in. But then business started to slow down. And Lee Hecht has said, why don't we take the 40 vice president of client services, send them to MRG in Boston, get them certified as executive coaches? Let's pursue that as a business line. Let's try to provide executive coaching inside
Yeah.
of organizations. So we're not working with people who don't have a job. We're working with people who do have a job, but just want to become more effective where they are or possibly prepare for what's next, like
Yeah.
a promotion. So that's how that transpired. That was
Interesting.
just a gift. Yeah, it was a gift.
Yeah.
And then the first person that I took on as an executive coach hired me away to become her vice president of organizational development,
Wow.
which was cool as heck. And the guy that I had to fire, who was like the person on retainer
Yeah.
to provide organizational development, must have done a good job firing him that first week, because about 4 years later, he came back and said, what do you think about joining our consulting firm? Would you like to be faculty?
Oh.
And I said, what do I know about consulting? And they focused on engineering and architecture. Thought,
Yeah.
what do I know about engineering and architecture? Nothing. But I said, I'd love to. I would love to.
Yeah.
Just knew. So I was ready. I just knew I was ready. And so I joined that firm. And boy, I tell you what, Franklin, the learning curve was straight up.
Oh, was
And of
it?
course, there's no compensation
Yeah.
unless you sell something. So that was terrifying. But money started coming in, and then we got sold to FMI, a consulting firm here in Denver. And then
Yeah.
the guy who I fired who said, do you want to start our own company with 2 other people? We named it Morph.
Yeah.
And that was 12 years ago. So that's how it happened.
Okay. Now, since that time, you said about 7 years ago, you went ahead and the other partners left the practice, and you're doing it all on your own now.
I love
So
it.
you are the one in your business. You're a one-person company. Can you talk a little bit about what are the things that you just love about that?
Oh, I love the autonomy. Oh, I love not having to check with anybody else. I love being able to hire subject matter experts. So I mean, I don't have to know about accounting or invoicing or taxes. I hire brilliant people who do. It was so liberating to realize the stuff I don't enjoy or I don't like or I'm not any good at, I can hire it.
Yeah.
And then I can focus on my area of brilliance, which is coaching and leadership development. And yeah, so no, I love the autonomy, and I love the freedom to do whatever I want and to trust my own gut on stuff, to enter into deep work, solve problems, figure it out. Yeah, I typically do a lot of leadership programs.
Yeah.
And so we just launched one May 3rd and 4th online, but the August and November and March ones will be in person for 40 engineers. And it's really exciting. It's really
Yeah.
exciting to do that. But I've also hired somebody to collaborate with me, which is lovely, but they're not an employee. I don't like being burdened by that. I don't like, that's why I really love the demographic of your podcast. I don't like the burden of employees.
Yeah.
I don't like the feeling of, oh God, I've got to go get enough business to put food in their mouth or pay their mortgage. No, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in that. I also don't like bricks and mortar. I don't like overhead. I like doing the work, getting a paycheck, and it all comes to me. Thank you very much.
So those are some of the benefits and some of the features that are adorable about it. And I share those sentiments with you almost to the letter. I am curious, though, as you have gotten adjusted to being on your own, what were the challenging times?
I think initially it would have been nice to have checked in with someone
Yeah.
and said, hey, what do you think? Could you weigh in on this? That was a surprise because I was used to the guy who I fired, who I then partnered with, was well over a decade older than me. And so he had a lot of experience as a consultant. So I was used to bouncing ideas off of him. So I would say that initially, maybe the first couple of months, it was a sense of, wow, um, I need to collaborate with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very intimate kind of thing. And I actually grew to love it very quickly.
Wonderful. Have you found that creating a support network around you has been important?
I haven't really done that.
Yeah.
I haven't really done that. I did it in Kansas City when I worked there. I had quite the network
Yeah.
that I invested in. When I lived in Ireland, I had quite the network that I invested in. When I lived in Southern California, that was all I did.
Oh, really?
Just really, because I was in business development at the time. So it was all about creating an external network. I think it was when we moved to Colorado. I guess I just love where we live so much that I can hardly wait to get home. So the idea, I haven't really, um, I've flirted with the idea of the think tank that we're both aware of
Yes.
for small businesses. And I'm considering that as rather a novel idea. Yeah, no, I haven't. One would think that would be a smart move,
Well, it is for some people,
but I haven't
but
done
not
it.
everyone. No.
I find that I love having the time to replenish, be in these beautiful mountains of ours.
Yeah.
I find I don't really need that.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about what you would direct someone to do if they had gone ahead and made the commitment to go into their dream career path, and they found that they didn't like it very much, or they found that that they were disappointed with it. What would you say to that person?
Do you have some of those?
I do. And I think a big part of it, after reading what I've read of your book, it ties right in with that they're going down into the bottom, and there is a time period where there's some disillusionment.
Yes, there is.
And I want people to understand that that may be an important part of their transition, but it doesn't necessarily mean they've made a mistake. And I'm kind of curious about where would you lead them?
I appreciate what you're saying. There can be some disillusionments. Boy, I have about 500 thoughts in my head right now. I know that when I've gone through really big changes and transitions, that I've looked for fables or stories to give succor or comfort or insight into the process. I know when I was going through one of my biggest ones, I looked to the oldest Sumerian tale called Inanna, how she went through the 7 gates of initiation, down into the dark, under the ground, where she stayed, where she connected with herself and her sister Rishnagal until she rose back up to be the goddess of the sun. And I appreciated that she was underground. And I appreciated that it was in the dark, not dark being a scary, awful thing, but dark being kind of cool, away from scrutiny, because there's something so vulnerable, really, about pursuing your dream. And I think being able to provide time to be underground, far away from prying eyes and scrutiny and having to live up to anybody else's expectations. It's such an intimate thing, and it's such a quiet thing, that there's something to be said for giving yourself permission to wilt
Yeah.
and bulb, right? And just exactly the way a flower does. They wilt, they go deeply underground, they're in the bulb, far, far away from any demands. And then when they feel the stirring of the sun, comes back up and becomes a green shoot in a plant. I think it's vital to have time underground. I mean, if you look at the metamorphosis of a butterfly,
Hmm.
starts out the caterpillar, goes into the cocoon, and basically becomes liquid goo. That's deeply disconcerting, I'm sure. Like, who am I? I bear no resemblance to what I thought I was going to be. I thought I was going to be a butterfly. What
Yeah.
happened? And then, add to that, once finally the butterfly is formed, it has to squeeze its way through that very small opening. And that's intentional so that the blood will get forced to the edges of the wings so that it can fly. I remember reading a story once, it was almost like a Zen koan,
Yeah.
where somebody saw the butterfly struggling to get out of the hole. And I thought, let me open the hole so it's bigger. The creature climbed out and fell onto the ground because it hadn't gone through that seemingly arduous, excruciating process of
Yeah.
squeezing itself out to get all the blood to the edges so that it could fly. So it's not easy, the
Yeah.
pursuing of a dream. It takes courage and it's lonely because often you're the one imbued with a vision and everybody else might think you're crazy. Like,
Yeah.
what? You're leaving your full, what? But one of the things that I've done back in the day when I was a career coach, say, okay, if you're considering the pursuit of a dream and it's a departure from what you've done before, you might consider, if you've got a job, as the, like, imagine a stove and you've got a pot on the front burner and it's boiling and you're tending to it and stirring it. I liken that to your job. But if you could take a pot and put it on the back burner, fill it with ingredients and liquid, tend to it
Yeah.
periodically, get it to where it's simmering, like you've taken whatever classes you need, you're ready, you're really feel like you've done everything you can to get that back burner pot ready, then it's so much easier to move the pot that's on the front burner off, move the pot that's on the back burner up. It's already simmering. Doesn't take much to go from a simmer to a boil. Sure takes a lot to go from cold to a boil. And so to me, most of us worry about income, good old Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We worry about survival, safety, security. Boy, those are bedrock. And when we haven't taken care of that for ourselves before we pursue the dream, we put undue pressure on ourselves to perform. So I
Yeah.
think also having some money in the bank for a period of time so you could last for a year, if possible, without having to rely on the dream generating income.
Yeah.
Boy, I think that would be ideal. So you're not making it harder on yourself
Yeah. Eliminate as much of that pressure as you can, right?
as you can.
Yeah.
So you're just pure. It's just you and the dream in
Yeah.
relationship with each other, because it will inform you every day how it wants to manifest. And I'm all
Yeah.
about manifestation, but I tell you what, before I do anything, I create a vision board.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Vision.
studied that
Yeah.
when I was 13, took a class with my mom and stepdad offered by Maxwell Maltz on his book,
Oh my
Psycho-Cybernetics.
gosh. Yeah. I
Do you
remember
remember
that.
that?
Yeah. My
Oh
dad
my
had
gosh.
that book. I
Yeah.
remember reading it when I was in college.
I don't think,
Yeah.
I mean, I weren't any pictures. It was pretty dense, but I do remember from that class that if you want to manifest your dream, create a vision board, or I think the language then was a treasure map. I mean,
Yes.
I could show you mine right here. It's got images that are connote life and energy and excitement as you move towards the fulfillment of that. And I use affirmations, and I, when I look at this, I get excited because it's drawing me to that reality.
Yeah.
So I work a lot with manifesting, because it's a real thing. Things show up in the unseen reality, non-ordinary reality before they manifest here.
Yeah.
And it's tending to them before they're here. Kind of like you would tend to a little bulb in the ground before it shows signs of life. It's there. You just don't quite see it yet.
Yeah. And it's complete as it is, right?
As it is.
Wow. This has been just fantastic. And I'm aware of our time reaching an end. But I wanted to ask one more question, and that is, what's next for you?
Don't laugh. I'm going to do a podcast, Franklin.
Hey, cool.
I'm going to do a podcast. Yeah, the name is The In-Between.
Okay.
I'm intrigued by all of the transformations that have become transformational.
Ah, very good.
Exactly what we started talking about.
Yeah.
I want to dive into. Like, I want to talk to people about how is it that you entered transition in the ending and emerged into the new beginning, a whole new enlightened version of yourself. I'm intrigued about that.
Yeah.
And so I'm imagining that the content from the podcast will become book number 2. Won't that be fun?
I would hope so, yeah.
Like I could have a chapter. I'm visualizing a chapter on each person that I engage with, and it becomes more like a chicken soup for the soul, or more like a pick it up, read all about Franklin's experience. You feel replenished, recharged, and then go about your day, rather than a book you read from cover to cover.
This just sounds wonderful. I'm getting goosebumps as you talk about it. I'm excited to hear it. So you need to make sure that you let me know so that I can let other people know when that podcast is out. And I'll remind people again, thewisdomoftransition.com is where you can find out more about Cheryl and the book, and the diagrams of the going into the deep and going underground and then coming back up again. And it's just fascinating stuff, and I would recommend it to anyone. Cheryl, is there anything else that you would want to say before we finish?
This has been a delight. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. I think we may have to have a round 2 at some point.
I'd love that.
Excellent.
People who work alone aren't antisocial, at least not most of us. If people think you're weird because you don't want to grow a big company and you'd rather spend most of your time working by yourself, you're just hanging around the wrong people. Your Own Best Company has a Facebook group that you're invited to join right now. We understand the urge to close the door, let your imagination run wild, and stay there until your creative impulse runs its course. We also understand the features and challenges that go along with running a business to support our solo flight lifestyles. Joining the group is free, and it's as easy as clicking the link in the channel description. So go there now and just join the group. Want to hear more where this came from? Subscribe to Your Own Best Company on your favorite podcast app or on the Franklin Taggart Coaching and Consulting YouTube channel. To get in touch with Franklin, send an email to yobc@franklintaggart.com. Thanks for listening.